Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be discussing the movie Blow Up from 1966, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni, with the main stars being David Hemmings and Vanessa Redgrave. This was Michelangelo's first British film, and let me tell you, it is distinctly British. It immerses itself in the 60s mod era, embracing the fashion, the music, and just the general culture of England at the time. And I would say, by doing so, it gives the movie a timeless vibe as well as its own distinctive charm. Much of what makes this movie interesting is down to the way it's shot, with various uses of camera angles and switches from close and far shots. However, I'm going to be honest, I'm not educated in the technical aspects, so I can't go into much detail on that, but I'm aware that for a while this movie was taught in courses for cinema due to its filmmaking, so it definitely has some pedigree in that regard. So what is the movie about then? Well, the movie starts off with a bunch of people driving around dressed as mimes and all sorts. And then we cut to a bunch of blokes coming out of a shelter looking less than impressed with life. It's here that we're introduced to the main character Thomas, who heads to his car, being swamped by the rowdy crowd asking for money, for which he gives it without question. It's clear as day that Thomas is upper class due to the style of his car, the way he carries himself, and he talks to a dispatcher through a CB radio, which was fucking rare by back in the day, right? We're introduced to Thomas's lifestyle in general when he returns to the studio. He gives a bunch of camera film to his assistant, so we know he's a photographer, and he tells the model that he's ready to shoot her photos. At this point, Thomas's charm really begins to show here as he gets right deep into the process and just, almost has like a sexual nature to it all. And then he just returns back to like this stoic, nonchalant attitude, like right after he's done. So you can see like he's only really interested in his work, like the rest of life he's not that bothered by. He carries himself with like a suave attitude, and he's clearly very confident in his lifestyle and his career. He treats everyone else with a bit of contempt and a bit of aggression, especially the models in the studio. It's clear that, again, he only really cares about himself, and he's just got this like ignorant sort of feel, and maybe a bit of a repugnant man, to be fair. He inquires with his friend about buying or taking his artwork, but is told no, which is the first sign of his boredom with life and just buying random things because he can. He's got nothing to interest him, in my opinion anyway. After relaxing at his studio, he ends up going for a drive where he stops off at an arts and antiques shop. He inquires about different PCs, pissing off the guy running the place at the time, and before long, he's back in his car and heads to the park to take some more photos. It's here where the main premise of the movie really starts to take hold, as he sees a couple heading into the wooded areas. He decides to follow them with some intrigue, at which point he decides to photograph them where they're kissing and cuddling and stuff like that. Before long, he's caught by the woman who chases him down and demands that he gives her the photographs. He obviously refuses to do so, saying it's not his fault that she can't have peace in a public area. Again, he has no regard for other people, he only cares about himself. And at this point, she tries to snatch the camera from him, at which point he tells her, "Don't spoil things, we've only just met." She says, "We haven't met, you've never seen me," and runs off. Now at this point, you can clearly see as the viewer that there's a body next to the bush. However, I'm not sure if this is intentional or whether because the film's been remastered from a higher resolution and whatnot, whether it's just something we can see now because we're watching it at a higher resolution than it was ever shown back in the day. So I'm not willing to really comment on it too much as part of the story, because again, I don't know if it's intentional. He meets his agent and it's revealed he's created a book of photos, and he wants his photos of the park to be the final part, providing peace to the violence in his book, apparently. As he's having this discussion with his agent, a man stares at them through the window of the cafe, who's never identified in the movie, but as soon as he's noticed, he quickly heads off and gets in the car and drives away. So, as Thomas walks back or heads back to the studio in his car, the woman from the park appears again at his door, surprising him, and he says, "How do you know where I live?" There's no explanation of that. He just sort of runs with it. She wants to get the photos from him. He explains that he needs them, to which she says her life is a mess and it would be a disaster if he got out. Thomas then uses his charm to try and charm her and tell her she could be a model. There's a little bit of back and forth between them, a little bit of flirtation. They end up dancing, and she again tries to steal the camera and run away with it. At which point he says that he's no fool, and then there's again more conversation, bit of flirtation again. She undresses to try and sort of seduce him into giving her the footage, well, not footage, the film. At which point he tells her to get dressed and says, "I'll sort the negatives out, but we'll get it done." They end up again flirting again, but he's interrupted by the delivery of the propeller that he's bought from the art store earlier in the movie. Again, just further enhances this idea that he's got nothing interesting going on in his life, so he's just buying things, trying to get some interest and some like meaning to it all. It's at this point that we see Thomas get right deep into developing the photos, and he is starting to notice that he's taking a picture of something. And there's a period of time where he's like, developing the photos, using his cameras, trying to like zoom in the way he knows how to see the dead body that, as I mentioned earlier, was clearly obvious to the viewer, but makes me think that it wasn't intentional, however, not sure. At this point, he decides to go back to the park to see if what he thinks he saw is still there, and he finds the body. He runs off in a panic, going back to his studio, where he tells his friend what he saw. Again, we see more of his chaotic lifestyle because he goes out, he ends up stumbling from a concert all the way to some social gathering where his agent is, and it's just a little bit of madness, like shows his lifestyle as, like I say, chaotic. He wakes up in the morning and decides to head back to the park again. At this point, he discovers that the body has vanished. As he's heading back to his car, he passes the tennis courts where the rowdy mimes and other protester like hippies appear again from the beginning of the movie, and they start playing tennis with imaginary rackets and tennis balls, and to which point he's watching, and then they gesture to him to throw the imaginary tennis ball back to them. There's like a period of silence where they're all watching him and he's hesitant to do so, and then he eventually does it, and the movie ends with him contemplating in the middle of the grass as the credits roll. Now, what do I think of this movie? Well, this is one of the more unique movies in my collection, as in my opinion, it's purely a character study of the main character, Thomas, with a slight mystery of the dead body thrown in. We don't even get any real answers about the body or a resolution to why he was killed or who did it, which will likely infuriate a lot of people who go into this expecting your typical murder mystery. What we get instead is a far more interesting movie though, in my opinion, as essentially Thomas is a man who's got everything in the midst of the modern era of England. He's got women throwing themselves at him to be models, who allow themselves to be talked to like shit. He's got an ignorant confidence to him that sort of just allows him to do whatever he wants, and yet he's not satisfied by any of it, as you can see throughout the movie. You see plenty of times that he's searching for something to interest him. He's trying to buy random bits of artwork. He ends up buying the propeller from the antique store. He then tells his agent that he wants to buy the building of the antique store. We're actually only already about halfway into the movie, if not further, before Thomas even realizes he's taken photos of a dead body. So that should give you some indication of how meaningful that even is to the plot. From that point on, I would say it becomes more of a question of interpretation, as he's the only person to ever interact with the body or talk about the body besides his friend and agent, who only talk about it because he tells them about it. When the woman he photographs runs away, she runs straight past the dead body of the man she was with less than 5 minutes before by cuddling and kissing, and doesn't react to it at all. Then there's obviously the appearance of a man at the cafe window, but is he just a stranger looking at the photos that they're talking about, or is he someone connected to the murder? We have no idea. The woman shows up at Thomas's house, but how does she know where he lives? Has she followed him, or is there something more sinister going on? Again, we have no idea. My personal thought is that the body was never there, and it was all in his head, as he subconsciously searches for something interesting in his life. And the reason the woman was so mad and wanted the camera film is because she was having an affair. She clearly is with a guy, secluded in a park, and she is distressed by the fact that photos have been taken from her. At the point that she chases after Thomas, the man isn't dead yet, so again, it's up to interpretation. Is she mad that she's been seen with someone she's having an affair with? Or is she mad that she's been seen with him because she knows he's going to be killed at any moment? Again, it's up for interpretation. The ending of the movie for me is key here, as the mimes show up playing imaginary tennis, and obviously Thomas engages with them after some hesitation. For me, that is a possible way of showing that he eventually embraces the idea that it was all in his head, and opens the avenue obviously for the idea that the body was never there and he was just seeing things. Of course, I may be entirely wrong, and I'm happy to admit that I am, if that is the case, but I quite enjoyed the movie with my own interpretation, and ultimately enjoyment is what it's all about, right? So what would I rate this movie? I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5 on our little 5-star rating system. A lot of what makes it interesting to me relies on me creating my own interpretations on things in the movie, whereas many people would probably find that irritating. Without using my imagination, the setup and the dialogue between the characters is quite dull and to the point. It doesn't really move the plot along in any meaningful way, so I feel like I can't put it in a higher bracket just because I feel like to be a 4 or 5-star movie, you just generally have to be enjoyable for everyone rather than just a select few. And I think there's not enough here for like your average person to enjoy it unless they're looking at it in a more meaningful way like I am. However, I still enjoyed it a lot, and I'll be revisiting it in the future. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll join me again. And on that note, I'll see you in the next one.